Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandon Savage. I'm going to be the moderator today. Before we do the introductions of our panel, we have another sponsor for today's session, who's actually going to be on the panel with us as well, but I want to give Mike a chance to tell us a little bit more about PointCentral. So Mike, the podium is yours.
All right, thank you, Brandon. Thank you, TechHome, for having me here to say a few words. I'm gonna walk the line. I don't want to give a commercial here on PointCentral. I've sat in your chair, and I know that it's sort of an eye roller, but I'll just keep you informed about what we do and encourage you all to come visit PointCentral at our booth to talk a little bit more about what we do if you have some questions. When John had asked to come up and sponsor, he talked about what's the future really of the multifamily prop tech experience. And rather than it being a device, I'd really like to focus on what it should be and what it is now, the unified experience, right? So I think I've done, 15 years in the industry. I think I've probably done a couple hundred of these types of events, and I just got back from another event last week that I think some of you were at. And when I walk the halls, man, we're in the midst of this tech revolution in our industry. And while that's super exciting, the reality is if I'm in your chair, it's pretty blurry, right? There's a lot going on right now, and I think that's pretty overwhelming. So if you're evaluating a solution or a feature, I think the big thing to look out for right now is to solve one problem, are you creating 4 or 5 others? And that's what we want to avoid. So, how do we bring this into focus? That's what we're really focused on at PointCentral. So our parent company is Alarm.com. We are hyper-focused on delivering smart property technology solutions for the rental industry. Alarm.com, our parent company, has been doing this for 25 years, providing security solutions in the residential and commercial space. We look at this, and forgive the humble brag, but it's important. This type of technology, and some folks that I've spoken with, we talk about pain, and that's kind of like the salesperson's cue. Tell me about your pain, and nobody wants to really reveal that. But for me, this is all a big jigsaw puzzle, and let's just throw our pieces on the table and figure out how to solve some problems. That's what I want to do. That's what we do on this panel here as well. But what I've found, tried and true, is we look at the adoption curve right now. Our early adopters in smart property tech, they've moved. We're in what we'd call the big middle right now. And the big middle, what I hear all the time is folks, they're reluctant, they're hesitant. They don't want to move forward with someone that maybe won't be around in a year or two. There's a lot of that going around, right now as well. So give me 10 seconds to humble brag here, but the PointCentral Alarm.com solution, look, it's been around for 25 years. So we want to be really, really committed to delivering a reliable, stable solution that will be here tomorrow. That is really important. This is that rare technology that when you implement it, okay, if something goes wrong, the phone rings 300 times, right? Nobody wants that. That's why the reluctance is in our space right now. People are nervous. So the big middle won't adopt until they're comfortable. And the way to do that is through unifying the technology, okay? So this is kind of a table setter for some of our panel today. We want to focus on, feel-good tech, but also unifying tech and what works for the building, for the owner, operator, and for the resident. We got to get the triple win, right? So when we focus on our solutions, what we want to do, we do tech design. Usually, folks are looking to solve one, if not some or all of these problems in kind of one swing, right? What we don't want to do is have 12 different apps that solve 12 disparate problems. Now you've created a brand new problem, which is tech fragmentation and sort of app fatigue, right? Avoid that. And I think that's part of our reluctance here. So, briefly, what does PointCentral focus on? A lot of times it starts with access control, right? This is how residents, staff, and guests get through the building seamlessly to get to where they're supposed to go at the right time. So meet people where they are, get them access to the right spaces in a safe, proper way. Video intercoms, all part of the solution as well. I think COVID triggered this mass movement in self-guided tours. And one of the problems that sort of came from all of that was, well, yeah, we can get people into the model unit, but how do we get them through the intercom and then through the 2 or 3 access points, but also limit to make sure they don't go into X, Y, and Z spaces. Okay, so access control and video intercoms can solve for those things. Again, you'll hear this word a lot from me, unifying the tech. We want to make sure that we can include all of that on a single platform. AI deterrence. This is kind of a fun one. We just launched this last week, and what we're seeing now is folks leveraging video and combining that with AI technology to either supplement some of the security solutions they have in place or to use it as a deterrent. So for example, what this product can do is with pattern and recognition, I'll pick on the gentleman here in the blue shirt. If you're breaking into my car, which sir, I know you'd never do, but if you were to do that, this device right now can say, excuse me, sir, in the blue shirt, we see you, please remove yourself from the space, from the area. Okay, that's not a human being that's having to monitor and do that. That's through AI and pattern recognition, color recognition, okay, that can do those types of things, okay? And so when we start to implement AI as a deterrent, okay, now what you're doing is you're creating safer, more secure spaces for residents, staff, and guests. The in-unit stuff is kind of easy, and I know I'm rushing through this because I want to give our panelists plenty of time here. But the smart apartment piece, like that's just one piece to the puzzle. We focus on that. I think there's a lot of core value in that for the staff, but also for the residents. Your residents want that customized living experience with convenience and safety in mind. But what happens when you have those things in place is you're now monitoring energy, okay? I've been talking about for a couple of years, how do we take what has historically been a reactive maintenance model and make it proactive and even preventative? We do that through monitoring energy management and understanding when to send maintenance a trigger if an HVAC is not performing at an efficient level. Water's the same way. This is like the sneaky killer, right? Water. So I'm a baseball guy, and this is like the heartbreaking story for me is I heard a story from an owner that said, yeah, we had a water leak that went 2 or 3 floors down and ruined a brand new Mickey Mantle rookie baseball card. Okay, that's a $1 million plus asset there. Can't get it back. Renter's insurance, like, okay, but that card is gone, right? Water gets into everything, it ruins everything, and the problem is like it's a sneaky sort of silent killer because sometimes you don't know until it's too late. So what we want to do is implement solutions that don't just detect it, but also give insight into flow, high flow, and provide the right notifications to the right people when there's a problem. Self-guided tours we talked about, pretty self-explanatory. Again, all of this should be on a single solution, so you're not having to implement 9 or 10 different types of techs to accomplish what you're wanting to accomplish in your tech strategy. It should all be built for the enterprise and should be simplified in a single platform. So anyway, I went through that quickly, but if you have questions, would love to interact with you at our booth at PointCentral. But if you do have any questions for me specifically, please catch me here after lunch, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to chat with you. Thanks for your time. I look forward to our panel here today.
I'll just add a personal testimony. I've spent the first 2 decades of my career in the electronic security industry, as I mentioned, kind of the ADTs of the world. And first started interacting with Alarm.com probably about 2005 and saw them grow as a company. When he talks about that in-unit experience, just what the residents are going to experience with the app and the experience, I honestly can tell you, because I've seen all the other products that are out there over 2 decades, Alarm.com does it the best. And if there was someone who was going to create a multi-tenant solution that allows you to be able to not only have that experience, but now to be able to have an administrative console to manage it, I would give 2 thumbs up from my experience to Alarm.com and PointCentral. All right, moving on to our panel tour today. Let's do some introductions. We'll start off. Mike's already introduced himself, so he's off the hook. But Kelly, can you introduce yourself?
I am Kelly Cox. I'm the National Strategic Partnership Manager for ADT. ADT just celebrated their 150th anniversary in this industry. I have been with ADT myself for 20 years and fall under the multifamily umbrella, also focusing on build-to-rent and single-family rental.
And if any of you here in the audience know what ADT stands for without looking online, you can have my dessert afterwards. That goes back to 150 years. Okay, Taylor, if you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, of course. I'm Taylor Whitaker. I'm the founder and CEO of PropTech IQ. We're a sales enablement platform that works with the vendors, but ultimately our goal is to provide transparency to the owner operators. So prior to this company and founding this about 5 years ago, I actually started at Alliance Residential Company, leading their innovation department and helping bring smart home technology into multifamily. Following that, then went to BH Management, did the same thing, but my primary responsibility was helping our owner-operators and the check writers, I would say, better understand the value that these technologies bring, like smart technology, but like other things as well, like package delivery and even more. So that's what we do, and that's really what our primary focus is working with vendors like ADT, PointCentral, and the like to help you guys better understand what value they're actually bringing to your assets.
So this kind of represents the tech and service stack of the topic we're going to mention today. Our last individual, Sam, is representing you. So Sam, can you introduce yourself?
Certainly. Sam Woodburn, I'm Director of Building Intelligence at Fairfield Residential. I am, I guess, the voice of that middle today that Mike spoke of, probably peers with a lot of folks here in the audience. So I think one of my asks here is, I don't want to speak on behalf of this group, obviously. I think kind of want to share my perspective from sort of Fairfield's seat and how we look at some of the decision making that goes into these things. A little bit about Fairfield. We're roughly 42,000 units of multifamily, 30 different markets, 1,400 Fairfield associates, approaching 200 assets, and we're on a strong growth trajectory. We've delivered about 3,000 units of new construction per year for the last several years, and quite a bit on the acquisition side as well.
And kind of where you positioned in the market, so our audience can kind of know where you're coming from. And like you said, we want to get your perspective, and then at the end of each section, I'll also open up to you, as we've done in the past sessions, for you to ask questions as well from your perspective.
Yeah, sure. We're distributed in a lot of ways, both geographically and asset-wise. So you can kind of see from the map up there, really strong presence in coastal markets, across the Southeast, not so much in the Midwest. A little bit in the Rocky Mountain region. And then on our actual asset side, it's, we have market rate podium deals in urban centers. We have garden style in more kind of suburban markets. And we actually have quite a bit of affordable, close to 20,000 units in the portfolio are affordable.
Terrific. So as we look at our topic for today, I did the sneak preview in this morning's session. But we're talking about feel-good tech. I want to make sure we're all engaged in this, because I know there's a tendency to be like, oh, feel good. Like, why are we spending money to just help people feel good? Tomorrow, we're going to dive into more of Gen Z and the kind of their thinking. And we heard this morning the expectation that technology is there, but it is more and more important for tenants to be able to feel that they're living the experience they want in their residence, and technology can help provide that. Now, with that as a initial foundation, as we kind of look about the different areas we're going to talk about that, there's a little bit more to feel good, and we're going to look at some different perspectives, not just the renter. Then we'll talk about navigating the landscape, hopefully bringing some of that blurriness into focus. Then we'll talk about some of the concerns with implementation, and then we'll try to look a little bit into the future as to what might be coming down the pipe in this area of more ways that things can feel good. So when we start off here looking at feel good, I'm going to throw my first question really to any of you. What constitutes feel good technology especially in the context of multifamily properties? What's kind of your view? Anyone want to go first?
I'd love to hear Mike's thoughts, to be honest.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
I see those churning,
There's the hot potato.
churning cogs over there.
I'd almost look at that graphic there and turn it upside down. I don't think we get to the resident until our owner operators and our staff feel good about what's being implemented. Otherwise, it'll never get there. And I think what I would lean into on this is really creating safe, secure spaces. I think there's a feel-good component to that. I think a lot of times we want to think about feel-good as the next device. Again, the next gadget, the next new wave, and it's important that we keep an eye on those things. But from a practical matter, right now, creating safe, secure spaces is in the top 2 or 3 on all the surveys that go out around what's important to our residents, what's important to our staff members, what's important to the building owners. We have to have secure, safe spaces, and tech has been a great enabler of that, whether that's through monitored security or AI talk-down type solutions. Some of the monitored stuff that Kelly's team provides has been, a big mitigator of squatters and folks that are disrupting leasing offices. So I'd probably start with that.
I think that for owners operators, saving money feels pretty good. And by being able to control the asset for water damage, vandalism, squatters, energy efficiency alone, being able to have some control over the threshold that your temperature is going to be, that thermostat's going to be under control in those vacant units and under construction units in particular, that's a huge moneymaker.
And a particular overlap to our discussion yesterday afternoon about energy.
Absolutely. Yeah, just really to echo what you guys said. I think it really is first understanding what are the challenges the owners and investors are having, and ultimately if they can do what they are looking to achieve better, of course that trickles down to the operators, then of course the residents at the end of the day. So how do we provide residents with something that's going to make them feel good? I very much am a believer that good technology they should never recognize is actually there. It's something that's happening in the background. It's something that is making sure that the right things are happening at the right time, but they shouldn't have to think about it. That is the point of these platforms to exist. So I think
Simple
feeling
to
good,
use.
absolutely. Feeling good to me is waking up and knowing things are working and I'm not having to do anything, right? Because it's like, I'm in IT, right? We've all been exposed to technology, but they typically get the call when things break, not when things are going well. And I'm a big believer in not hearing anything is not a bad thing. That's a fantastic thing. Things are running as they should be.
It is interesting from a technology standpoint, because I think we're kind of in some of the same generational cohort. I remember having to help my parents with technology, but now I feel like I'm having to help my kids with technology because I'm right there in the middle. They don't know the underlying stuff because they're so used to it just working.
Absolutely. So absolutely.
Sam, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw the sort of the headline for the conversation, my mind sort of immediately went to like, indoor air quality sensor, that type of stuff, sort of resident health. I feel like I'll walk back on that quite a bit, and really my view is kind of pretty holistic, really. And I think that's also the challenge, right? Is you kind of look at all these things, and to create that experience that really is feel good, it's that full stack of everything. So how do you start to unblur that? And I think for me as sort of the owner representative, it's starting to peel back, kind of what questions we can ask to get to those values. So is solution X, is it accretive to the deal, right? That's a great place to start to see if we can kind of unblur some of the variability. At the end of the day, there's probably one thing that all of us in here do really well, and that's, invest and develop in real estate deals that make money, right? And we've been doing that well for a long time. And I think that makes the incremental change hard, right? So I think for me, it's really looking at sort of those top line things, and what are sort of the quick wins that we can associate with that value of feeling good. So there's a lot of things in there.
So moving from a stakeholder to now starting looking at the technology, we're not going to be able to talk about every single one of these technologies. Not every one of them is necessarily prime time for multifamily, but I think it's good to understand what are some technologies that could be contributing to this from the user's standpoint. Health and wellness, sleep technology, fitness and activity tools, air purifiers. Air quality has gotten a lot of attention over the last 4 years as we emerged from the pandemic. Air monitors, sense, comfort and convenience. So the smart climate, making it so that the room feels good in terms of temperature, humidity. Smart window shades, being able to control that lighting. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago in Denver, pretty new resort there that had beautiful windows looking at the mountains, but man, there was about 4 hours of the day where it was pretty much useless because the sun was just coming in and beating on everyone in there, and even the shades they tried to put in there just did not help. We love to sell a place that has great views. but we need to be mindful of the sun. Voice activated technology, lots of different options out there. We look at social and community engagement, various different community apps you can have in your communities. We've got, coming up between what Meta's offered, what Apple has on the market, virtual and augmented reality are out there. We maybe don't see the full use cases yet, but I think it's fair to assume that they could present themselves in the next 5 to 10 years and could have a place within our communities. Safety and emotional security is what we've already spent some time talking about. Noise canceling tech within the buildings and maybe shared spaces. Entertainment, leisure tech, figuring out music, where music can play its role, whether it's in shared spaces or having integrated audio within our units. Home theater, outdoor tech for the shared spaces, and that can be audiovisual and others. Tomorrow at lunchtime, we're going to talk about smart kitchens for shared spaces and some of the technology and opportunities there. Productivity, working from home, Wi-Fi, obviously making a pretty strong appearance there. So as you kind of look at some of these things, what are some that are standing out that you're seeing are already becoming table stakes in communities and multifamily communities?
Can we get your opinion first?
Yeah.
I know we're totally wanting to hear you at the end, but I'm really curious looking at this list.
No, I think some of it goes back to what I was saying, right? And it's, you have this laundry list menu, right? So you have to pick and choose, as much as we'd love to kind of do everything on there, does it all make sense in a realistic way? So things that add value, I think one thing that can be really helpful is look at certain signals for where, outside money flows into certain solutions, right? So you could look at, say, groups in private equity that are willing to back bulk Wi-Fi, right? So if outside money is willing to invest in that, that's a pretty strong signal that, not only is there probably a good return on it, but we can also enhance experience. So I think areas like that, there's certain signals, if you look, that you can kind of start to prioritize things. And again, not that we wouldn't want to do most of these things, but when we're in a bind, a lot of the times it's what does the financial impact look like?
So you guys don't really have a stack, I guess really more so I'm curious, is there a unified approach to how you're approaching these deals that you're constructing? Is there kind of a wish list of what you want to include? And if it makes financial sense, that's what gets the check? Or is it like...
Certain things, right? So like bulk, I would say on all new developments, expect that there's going to be fiber. It's going to be, 1 gig symmetrical. And that's kind of a standard, right? But outside of that, things might get a little more opaque. Certain things, access control, an integrated system, that's important to us, right?
Oh, yeah.
Package management, I think most of us have talked about the challenges there. Again, I would call that table stakes to have some sort of solution. Smart blinds, that's where we start to get into a little bit more gray areas in my mind.
I think there's this inherent sort of obligation to create safe, secure spaces for, in our industry. And that's what I love about what we're doing here is that there's already there's nobility in providing housing. Like it's needed. It's a really hot topic right now, especially with affordability and lack of inventory, et cetera. But if we talk about creating safe, secure spaces, here's something that's resonating. One, is it making money? Is it saving money? Is it differentiating your community? Something that we're getting a lot of great feedback on is this sort of follow me technology. Think about student housing. Think about maybe your parking structures require a decent walk from point A to point B, and it could be dark. There's follow me technology. There's essentially you launch your resident app and you press the button, and you actually have a human being that's on with you that's essentially prepared to. They know your location. They can alert the authorities if something happens to you or if you feel uncomfortable. So that's resonating wildly well in student housing. I have a daughter who's not college age yet, thank God, but I think about, that's something I would like to have if she goes to school and there's that type of dynamic. I think about our female audience that there could be there's nerves there about not feeling good at nighttime if you're taking this walk from point A to point B and it requires, several turns around the corner. And if you don't provide that safe, secure space, as an alternative to that, if you're maybe in a challenged community, that follow me technology is really, really resonating.
And I think technology is beyond the hardware. Most of new construction that we see has smart thermostats involved or installed. It makes sense to do that. Oftentimes a smart lock is installed. It makes sense to do that. Kind of behind the scenes that I think gets missed is predictive maintenance. So with this technology, especially with AI involved, predictive maintenance to know that like, hey, the furnace filter needs to be changed. This system, the furnace is short cycling. It's going on and on. Something is going on there. Let's resolve this before it becomes a bigger issue. So this is all great technology. Some of it's going to stick, some of it's not. But I think that what needs to be a spotlight put on it is what's happening behind it. That's not only going to generate money for the owners, the investors, but also to save money.
Yeah, I think when you talked about leaks detection, anyone who's had damage within a multifamily unit knows that can add up very, very quickly. To have that ability to predictively, proactively respond to that before it becomes a $100,000 plus issue has value. To your point about maintenance, being able to not just wait until the batteries have died for the door locks, but to proactively say, okay, it's at 20%, we're going to create the system will create a service ticket for that tech to go out and to replace those batteries. That has real value when it comes to your bottom line.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, I think you have to put a lot of thought into what experience are you passing on, right? So, and that's in who you partner with and who you pick. So if you decide to go 10 different ways and pass on 10 different experiences, you have to live with that, right? And that sells something else.
So yeah, I think that gets us a good segue into our next section where we're talking about navigating that landscape. There's a lot of landmines, and if you don't want your residents' smart home app to look like this, where you've got 12 different apps like I do because I'm an
Brandon,
early
we
adapter,
gotta talk after this, man. What are you doing to yourself?
I see the cool new tech and I gotta try it out. And I love integration, and if I could find a company that can do it all, let's talk about it. But absolutely, you don't want your residents to do that, and you don't want to be doing that from an administrative level. You don't want to have to go into one solution to look at your smart thermostat data, go into another solution to manage your door locks, and then have to figure out how to be transferring that data back and forth between your property management system.
What's even better is when the technology integrates with your PMS, and then you don't have to do anything. There's no heavy lifting for you.
Right.
Because
that's the key.
I think the shift is beyond just hardware, like you said. So problem one, how do we get all the smart devices to talk to each other? Problem two, resident wants to pay rent from the same app that, they do something else from. So it's pulling both those pieces together.
And that same app, they also want to be able to get access to their gym and their pool and their amenity center and to their gate. There's so much technology that's available that can really put it into one app for that and living in that resident experience. Because the thing to keep in mind is when you're choosing an integrator, when you're choosing a product, hardware piece, that those companies aren't only representing themselves, they're also representing the brand, your brand, yeah.
So I think just recently you guys were both at OpTech as you were going there and kind of viewing the landscape there. What thoughts or input do you have when it comes specifically to how clients, what type of obstacles owners and operators are going to have when it comes to trying to integrate a solution or multiple solutions onto their properties?
I think you start with what problem or challenges are you trying to solve? What's important to you there? And then I think you start to build sort of this tech strategy from there. So you avoid that landmine of 9 different apps for 9 different things. In fact, I think it's really interesting that you launched that because I think for a long time, and this still exists, the single family or the owner-occupied environment is sort of like the test environment for smart home, right? Because you can tolerate that, just you and your family, because that's your house.
Yep.
From an owner-operator perspective, think about a 300-unit building. Think about a portfolio of 30,000 units. It's a whole different animal. In fact, I think multifamily gets sort of a bad rap for saying, oh, we're slow to adopt. Well, there's a reason for that because it's 50,000 people, not a family of 4, right? So I think that's why in the design phase, it's what problem are you trying to solve? and you start to work through that. And then what problems, budget-wise, are you looking to solve a year from now? And you start to build this strategy. And then once you have sort of this solution design, I think the next step there is, let's talk about communication. How does it go at the corporate entity to make sure that it gets to the on-site level, that the staff and the residents are all using the technology from how we drew it up from the design phase? Because there's a big disconnect there sometimes once you roll something out. And we have groups that say, gosh, we just invested in this solution, but our engagement is down. Well, why is that? What happened during the kickoff? So again, identify the problems, find the right partners, and then make sure that the communication for the rollout is really synonymous across all stakeholders.
Anything you add?
The only thing I would add is, and we saw this early on when builders started adopting technology, is getting stuck in that hole of these really cool products that are available. And we want to put in this lock and this thermostat and these lights, but they don't speak to each other. So the danger of choosing products that are proprietary and not having, as the owner operator, not having the ability to utilize that technology the way that you want to utilize it.
Being in the residential electronic security industry for a long time, it was always interesting to see these upstarts that would come up with their proprietary technology, and you try to tell customers, like, yeah, it looks pretty slick and stuff, but do you think they're going to be here in 2, 3, 4 years? Because we see that cycle where 5 years later, and I think there was one in the news just in the last 6 months, a pretty major player, I can't remember who it was, where they're deprecating all their stuff out in the field. And it's like, that you don't want to be, it's hard enough being, again, a single resident home that's having to deal with that versus, however many tens of thousands of units, and now you've got technology that has gone obsolete because your partner's no longer supporting it.
I think working with a partner that understands the landscape, we're talking about navigating this landscape, but understands the landscape and what's coming next, what's coming in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, what that technology looks like and how it's going to adapt and grow. Because it's a scary thing for owners to invest in technology and in solutions that this works today, but in 3 years, is this still going to be relevant? And in 5 years, when the landscape changes again, how are we going to be able to utilize this technology that we invested in for our residents, the resident experience and the property manager's experience, and how is it going to be able to grow? And it's a scary thing. That's why it's relying on the subject experts in the space to help navigate that.
Part of our duty and due diligence is not to just look at the solution sets, right? But it's to look at the company and their business model, and I think really drill into that. And I guess the one thing I would just harp on is the details really matter, So if I'm looking at EV companies, right, I don't maybe necessarily want a venture-backed company, right? It's hardware, it's a long sales cycle. How are they approaching their go-to-market? I think it's super important to drill into those details. Yes, the hardware has to be great, interoperability is great, non-proprietary is great, but how are they really bringing their product to market? That's a huge piece of the puzzle.
I love that. And I'll tell you, back in the day, I used to get a lot of flack about it, but at Alliance and BH, when we would be vetting new vendors, I would always ask them about their 12 to 18 month growth strategy as a startup or whatever they were. And if they were talking about, oh yeah, we want to build and we want to sell, I'm like, all right, cool, no thanks. Because we were looking for longevity. It takes too much time, energy, and effort to invest in these systems to be getting caught up in an acquisition. And I continue actually to get calls even to this day from owners that adopted solutions that are no longer being offered in the space. And they are concerned, stressed, scared, all the above, because they're like, we have all this hardware deployed and we have nothing to do with any of it. So what do we do now?
Right.
And that's where, I think there's so much noise, but it's mainly because these salespeople, they get you hooked on, hey, you want this shiny new toy. Don't think about your problems. Don't think about what this is going to do or what it even is going to change for you, but you should buy this shiny new toy. And I think that you guys really can push these vendors and have them give you pretty much as much transparency as you want, but you have to be willing to dig at the end of the day. So not to get off on a tangent, but I think that's overlooked often.
No, I agree with that. I think sometimes it's the idea captures 99% of our attention. 99% of the work is actually downstream, right, in the execution and the details.
Absolutely.
The rollout, like we're talking about, do you have a partner that's invested with you? After they prop up their solution, Are they going to stay around? Are they going to help you out? Are they going to be available when you call?
Absolutely.
3 weeks ago, I was with a group of students that were in a case competition in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and the case competition was sponsored by Collins Aerospace. And the focus was on supply chain and logistics. And one thing that kind of blew my mind, because I've spent so much time in kind of emerging technology, and you're talking, like you said, 12 to 18 month windows, and maybe you've got a 3-year plan. They had asked these students to put together a 10-year plan. And I was like, why are they caring about 10 years? Well, they're making products that when it goes into a Boeing 757 or into an Apache helicopter, it's expected to work for 50 years. Yep. And they have to go through all their suppliers and be like, okay, we're making a commitment to, if you're going to be our supplier and have a part for this, like you have to guarantee that you're going to have that part for us for 50 years. They sit on like $300 million worth of inventory that their biggest expense is they have to make sure they dust it off occasionally for when they need it 20 years ago. I talked to a buyer who's like, yeah, I just put a purchase in yesterday. It's an 80-year buy. I mean, it's just a completely different mindset than what we have today. But I think it does communicate the fact that we do need to think a little bit more long-term and stability.
Absolutely. I just think it gets too lost in the cool new shiny bauble. Because I mean, it's like, I don't disagree. There are some really great technologies out there and they're exciting. But I mean, I just think about, the guy in the back of the room that's like, why would we want that old technology? It's been around for 20 years. It's like, yeah, and it works every time. I would rather have that in my community than something that's new and up and coming, just because, again, you think about the feel-good component. If I am a resident and I am living in one of these communities that is adopting technology, I'm not feeling very good if I'm going through a negative, technology experience because I've gotten caught up in the middle of a decision that I had nothing to do with. Some person in an office made this decision, and now me, my family, my dog, my kids, I have to be uprooted and inconvenienced, and that is a complete counterintuitive approach. And I think feel good, like I said, it should not be really any sort of friction at the end of the day for that resident.
So hopefully we haven't scared you away from actually making a decision and acting, even though we have kind of tried to give you some warning. So before we move on to the actual implementation process, I want to ask you, if you are finding yourself in kind of the decision making, you're trying to decide, should we move in and then add one of these particular features? What questions might you have for this team up here when you're still in that decision making? Should we, shouldn't we? What partner should we be looking for? What questions should we be asking? So changes, I'm just going to repeat that real quick for the recording. So change isn't easy, and what's the pain for the gain? You really need to understand what's the gain for the pain. Make sure you understand why we're going to do this. Does it make sense?
But not doing something is just as bad, right? So you have to understand what we do. We look at implementation data at PropTech IQ. This isn't a flog for us. I don't sell anything to owner-operators. So good news, I'm not selling you guys. But what I do see in my data is ultimately that there are communities side by side, ones that have technology solutions and ones that don't. And there is a clear line that is starting to form that the Gen Z will not rent at a community that does not have a certain experience, period. The vacancies are dropping faster than anything I've ever seen, and all I'm trying to do is educate that you have to make a decision. It is not an opportunity for you guys to sit on the wayside. That time is past. You have to make a decision. The question is, what boat are you gonna get on? Are you gonna get on a boat that's a cruise liner, is gonna make it to the other side of the ocean, or are you getting on a rowboat that's telling you that, oh yeah, we're gonna build a bigger boat on our way to England? Like, nah, I'm good, bro. I don't wanna be on a rowboat in the middle of the ocean. You know what I mean? And not to put it, in a blunt fashion.
Has anyone broken it to you how Titanic ended?
I know.
I just want to make sure.
Get on this cruise ship.
That's fair. I do think, though, this is the best time ever to be looking at new technologies. I mean, there are so many great opportunities out there, and the savings and money on the opportunity side is huge, but it is definitely something that should not be taken lightly. And it's not something you should just be taking, a salesperson at their face value, because I have seen wrong situations occur all the time. So just do your research, do due diligence, and ultimately ensure that the resident is not the one that is paying for the decision that goes wrong, right? That's really, at the end of the day, I think what all of our responsibility is to that resident and ensuring that they have a positive living experience.
And if you aren't yet convinced about this generational shift that is happening with Gen Z, both of tomorrow's sessions, I promise, will change your perception. There is a fundamental change in how decisions are made for this generation. And not only are we going to talk about Generation Z, we're actually talking about the next generation that's coming after them. They're only 5-6 years away. You may not even know what the name of that generation is. I'm not going to tell you yet. You're going to find out tomorrow. But they've been named, and they're the oldest of that is already 12 years old. They're going to be making decisions in your markets in 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay, it is coming. It's real.
Yeah, my advice there would be just don't wait, right? I started at Fairfield, it hasn't been all that long. It was 2022, and my feeling then is, it's great. Fairfield's thinking about this, but late to the game, right? I don't actually think that that's true. Kind of in hindsight, I think now is actually a great time. If you're looking at the next new development cycle, which is, we're kind of kicking the can, right? From the time that we're going to put something on paper to a resident's going to touch that, if it's a hardware thing, probably 3 years, right? It might be 4 or 5. So in terms of just renter resident preferences, 5 years from now, it's the things we're talking about. It's here, it's now, and you got to build that time into your planning.
Yep, I'm sure a lot of you have kind of been sitting on the sidelines for uncertainty, and we've got clarity today. We're the day after Election Day. We've got a clear picture of what the next 4 years are likely going to be like, whether we like it or not. We can make decisions, and it would probably be a good bet that real estate is going to have some upside over the next 4 years.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving to implementation and concerns. Make sure I've got my spot here. Okay, so I've listed off a whole bunch of potential concerns here. I'll kick this off with a question to Kelly. So technologies like smart lighting, air quality management, smart home automation, how can they be integrated effectively to make sure you're getting those tangible benefits? What does the implementation process look like? This is how you've got to make sure you're rolling it out.
Number one is design. It has to be designed for that community, for that, for your target market, how your end user resident is going to utilize that technology. Designing it in a way so that that technology really works together. So you don't have the 12 apps. Man, we need to talk about this.
We can talk
I have
afterwards.
concerns. But making sure that the technology is working together and speaking together, and that it's future-proofed. That when that technology, that next generation that's coming, that they can utilize that technology and add on to that technology. Training, education is key. Rolling out technology into a community or into a market, and not having the integrator or the partners that have an education process in place. You want to choose someone that's taking that heavy lifting off of you. You're not the technology experts. It's not something that we want to put on you, or that the owners want to put on you or on the local teams, and making sure that it's installed, serviced, monitored, managed the right way. What did I miss?
I think you covered it. Yeah, I like what you said there. I think technology without service is going to equal a nightmare, right? So you have to have not just tech that you can rely on, but also that service component to where if and when something happens, you have somebody that can address that. So that's hyper important. I'm interested in Taylor's take on kind of cost versus value. But I'd just reiterate. Well, what am I trying to say? Reiterate.
It's been a long 2 days.
It has been a long 2 days, a lot of travel. I'd reiterate that when you're working with a vendor or kind of interviewing them, make sure they're a guide, right? It's funny. I get this kind of funny thing about being in sales, and again, I think it's puzzle pieces. I don't think it's convincing you to do something you don't want to do. I think it's providing you guidance and insight and expertise into where you're trying to go. And I think there's a very clear line there. And as we get further and further into tech adoption and multifamily, I think we're more partners than we are, vendors versus owner operators. I think we got to work together on this thing, because these implementations can be complicated. So we need to talk about like the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, what are the challenges? What do you have training and enablement? What does that look like when you roll out different types of tech? Let us understand that so we can get as much information on the table before someone shows up at the community for an install and your property staff saying, wait, who's this? Why are they here? And maintenance is concerned about what's going on the wall. They're very protective about their facilities. So definitely look at that as a partnership because it's long term. This is not dating. This is a marriage, right?
So with that in mind and knowing that there needs to be a good plan for implementation, for training, for deployment, for everything that helps set you up for success, obviously the vendors want to move fast. What is a reasonable time frame for trying to make a major change in one of these areas? Pick a technology. Is this a 3-month deployment? Is it a 6-month? Is it a 12-month? What do you recommend to make sure that you're checking all those boxes thoroughly?
I think it depends on if the owner, the operator has technology in place already. That's a different conversation. And that's also a different skill set. So if the property managers, if there's technology already on site, they're already working with that technology and comfortable with it, how is it working for them? And how's it working not only with your bottom line? Is it saving you money? Is it generating additional income for you? But is it working? And is it working the way that you originally sold that it would work? And what kind of headaches is it bringing on? What isn't working for you? And what problems are you seeing today that this technology isn't solving?
So just to do a quick poll of our audience here, how many of you feel like we've got a technology hub or we at least got the platform that we can then add new ones in? How many feel like you've kind of got that figured out? 2 hands. Okay, so the rest of you are saying, I don't feel like I've kind of got that base yet. So talk to them. If they want to get that base in place, what type of time frame might that look like?
3 to 12 months.
Okay.
It really depends. It depends on what their skill set is, what needs to be piloted, what needs to be tested. I would say 3 to 12 months. What do you think?
I think that's fair. Taylor and I worked together on, it was several thousand, right? And so I think you're probably pretty qualified to speak on time frames there.
I think you're way, what's the word I'm looking for? Optimistic, 3 to 12 months. I think most of these companies, if they're starting from square one, it takes them 6 months just to have conversations with the vendors in the space and understand like, okay, these are my players. These are some of the options. I still don't understand the differences between them, but I think I like this one. I think I like this one. And so they just end up in this, I hate to say it, but analysis paralysis because there's so much noise. And then also vendors with similar solutions will sell it and they will swear to you that it is different, but it's exactly the same. And so it's caused these confusion pain points where owners, they essentially become inundated with too much information. It's over complication, I would say. So I think we're seeing more of a 14 to 18 month cycle by the time they actually make it through, pilot a couple of solutions. And that's assuming, of course, that they don't leverage any sort of data on the front end. If they're trying to do it themselves, analog everything, it takes about 18 months at the end of the day.
Well, one thing to point out though is it a property or is it a portfolio, right? Because
Right.
we've done things
Absolutely.
in 30, 60 days, no problem. But if you're talking 50,000 units, that's a whole different strategy that takes, that's multiple conversations, right? And I'm sure Sam would agree that how many conversations is that, Sam, for 50,000 units, right?
Honestly, that's one of our biggest challenges, I think. Some of my early conversations were, Fairfield, 40,000 units, great. And I think
That's how they all think too.
Yeah. And people get really excited about that. And the reality of it is just like between geographies, between funds, investment strategies, like there isn't a one size fits all.
Not at all.
The best, if you're looking for a quick win, it's probably more of like a pure play SaaS, like a maintenance work order solution, right? That you can come in, and even that, I agree, that's going to be 6 to 12 months, and there's probably still going to be this long tail touch point of training that it should honestly keep going in perpetuity that you're working with that group. If it's something with hardware, this is the challenge, is that it really is drilling in deal by deal a lot of times is what we're doing. And I thought that, the conversation yesterday was interesting about EV because I look at that and it's like, great, monetize EV. I think it's easy to say that thing. It's another to kind of drill into it and do the homework, right? And there's a lot of solutions where it's just, it's the tail is chasing the dog on cost, right? And you never actually see that ROI. It's escalating software costs, it's hardware, and it doesn't end. So, that's why I sort of say really look at the business model of the person you want to partner with and drill into that, because there's differences.
Absolutely. And I just want to touch on, there are enough implementations live in the field today that there is data out there that you don't have to take the word of these companies, whether or not they actually provide value. That's actually why we exist, is to help you guys see that we've performed the resident retention and conversion analysis, and we can tell you essentially, can a solution like PointCentral or ADT or SmartRent or any of the, whoever it is at whatever asset you're looking at, we can see, is that actually going to help that community? Because it's not one size fits all. And in Texas, it may make sense. It may not make sense in New York. It may not make sense in South Florida. Who knows? You know what I mean? But ultimately, it is different in every market. And so it's very important to understand your market, what the goals are that you're trying to solve for. And then, of course, also, I think not having a single solution, but having a couple of best in class that you can lean on and know that they're going to come through. It's always good to have, multiple choices.
Yeah, I would say, for the folks that are like Fairfield, if you have these different product types, by all means, invest the time in coming up with your preferred solution set for that product type, right? I think by and large, you can make better matches. If you have a luxury type product, it's going to be this. If you have a suburban garden style, it's going to be this. And that's a good starting point.
So I'll go just a little bit off script, maybe spend 3-4 minutes total. So this may become more bullet, quick fire between each of you. You mentioned pilot programs. What are some key elements of a pilot? Because I see that as an opportunity that if we have so many that don't feel like they've got a solution in place, maybe the next stage is, okay, well, let's at least try to pilot something to see if we can get it to work. What are key elements to a pilot that you would give? And then you can share either successful pilots or nightmare scenarios you've had. I think everyone here probably has both.
Depends on the product, but I'll answer the question. If you're looking for smart property deployment, in unit, the only thing I'd caution on a pilot is if you do it in the one unit that's overlooking kind of the garbage, drop, and you're trying to fill a unit and lift rent, don't do that. You're not going to get a true representation of the technology. You actually have to, make sure the staff and the residents that are all engaged and they all truly see the value of the operational efficiencies and the integrations, where you're not going into the smart home portal because everything's done in Yardi, and then the integration takes over, and now your staff isn't having to lock down the unit upon a move out, and the thermostat's automatically set. They'll start to feel that time savings and that efficiency if you have a whole building. So do you jump into the whole portfolio? No, probably not on a pilot. But I'd caution you to say, hey, let's go put it in one unit and see how it works, because then it'll just get lost.
So you're saying, is there a minimum number of units, or you
Yes.
need to do a whole? Okay.
Yes, the minimum units is the whole community. That is literally absolutely.
So
yes.
pilot, your recommendation is a pilot needs to be the entire community.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's been for the last 8 years with any vendor. Anytime it's been a single unit deployed, there is never tangible, measurable, quantifiable value that you're going to see from that period. You're just not.
And I think that a pilot looks different with a traditional apartment complex compared to a built-to-rent community.
Absolutely.
Those are two different things. But across the board, a successful pilot and a successful partnership always starts with identifiable KPIs. So what is the owner trying to get out of this? What are their expectations, and can the integrator meet those expectations? Clearly defined up front. What are those timelines? What's the bottom line? If we move
Measuring
forward,
is the key, right?
the measurement of that, because if we think it's a successful pilot and Sam's like, well, it was all right, well, we've obviously not done our job, because we need to be able to identify early on, what are your pain points? Sorry, the pain word. What are your pain points? What are you looking to do long-term with this solution? And what are you expecting from ADT? How are we going to solve this for you? And the same in the reverse. What is your integrator expecting from you?
Sam.
Yeah. I would say pilot's kind of become a bad word unless it has the forethought, like you're saying. I feel like we've seen both. We've seen thought out pilots that have turned into something bigger. We've also seen the pilots where, it's kind of like, okay, well, it's the more begrudging pilot, right? And it doesn't really go anywhere. So I think it's being level about, hey, what are we trying to do? Where is this going? Make sure you have those conversations up front. Don't just try something to try something.
Okay. Before we move on to our last sections, any other questions you have about concerns and implementations, questions you have on how to, once you've made a decision on a product, or at least to try that product, rolling it out? Yeah, you're going to go see it on the exhibit floor. You're going to see a whole bunch of different players. So to restate the kind of two things. One, if we're have a unit and we're rolling out a technology that's going to cost us $1,600 per unit to roll, like how was that pencil out? What is the ROI going to be? And I'll turn it to Taylor to kind of talk about that. And the second is, how do you choose between all the different options that are out there? And I'll take a stab at that second one real quick. Now, you probably want to find another player that's kind of similar to you who's using it and talk to them and say, if you're talking to company A, have them give you a comp. Who's a current customer you have that meets my profile, has a building that's similar to the one we're talking about, and go talk to them and say, okay, does this really work? How long have you been with them? What is your experience? Can you talk about the ROI for a pretty upfront cost for technology?
Of course. And I'll tell you, like the pilot issue, to me, that was always the biggest hurdle for the whole industry. When I was at Alliance and after auditing their whole portfolio and seeing that to make any meaningful progress, we had to invest millions in a pilot, it just seemed very counterintuitive. So ultimately, you can of course see real-time value because there's been enough of these units deployed. But what you have to think about is your underwritten budget today to keep the community that you're talking about, whatever that may be, running, right? You've got a budget, you're paying people to do tasks that have to be done by law, right? Now, how does that $1,600 technology you're talking about counterbalance that pre-existing underwritten budget? And so ultimately, vendors do have the ability today, if they are willing to share their implementation data with a neutral third party, they can provide you with a report that actually gives you, without ever deploying a unit, what the real tangible benefit would be and whether or not you should consider a pilot. But ultimately, it's up to you to request that from the vendor and demand it from the vendor. But ultimately, outside of that, deploying it at scale and trying to measure it is really it's your best option, trying to figure out how does that underwritten budget get impacted. But there is impact. That impact is different in every market. And of course, depending on the type of asset, if it's a high rise, you have different challenges than garden style. But the technology does impact and intersect with that budget directly. And so if you can tell which solution, like for instance, I hate to throw brands out, we got PointCentral and ADT, right? So let's say PointCentral and ADT, you're looking at them side by side.
By the way, we work together.
I know. This is a horrible comparison. Let's say SmartRent, right? SmartRent and PointCentral. Okay, you have them side by side, and at the end of the day, they're similar solutions, but they don't do exactly the same things, right? So without flogging PointCentral, one thing they do really well is their HVAC analytic component, and I can tell you that's one thing that hits a piece of a budget from how do you maintain HVAC units on an annual basis that the SmartRent system would not hit. But there is an expenditure typically in the column of that community because you're going to have a certain amount of HVAC failures, you're going to have a certain amount of HVAC responsibility and maintenance required. And so really understanding how that technology impacts what you're already spending is what I'm getting at. There are real impacts, and it's just a matter of understanding where are those impacts to justify the $1,600, but it's not as big of a delta as you think it is once you get into the actual weeds.
We're at time.
Okay.
So let me just kind of wrap up, and then you can, whatever you're going to say, maybe add that as your final thought here. I'll give you a chance to give one other sentence paragraph. So key takeaways. You need to balance that innovation with practicality. It's got a pencil. You have the ability to shift from cost savings to adding value to your property, and I'll even scratch that last one. I think based on our conversation today, I don't even think that third one is as valid as it might have been when I was putting the slide deck together. The opportunities are out there, and you have to act. One sentence, kind of quick final thought.
Know your provider. Try to unify. Use a provider that's got a track record and that can unify the technology. 1,600 sounds high.
way
Yes,
high.
I was thinking the same
Don't
thing.
spend that,
Yeah.
please. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah. Look for a model, again, track record, but technology with service. And I think that's important.
Kelly?
Work with someone that knows what they're talking about. I think there's a lot of companies, a lot of integrators, a lot of solutions that, like we mentioned, they're salespeople and selling you this is the greatest solution, but working with a subject expert that actually knows the technology and can create a solution that fits your needs, that's going to save you a lot of headache.
Make a decision. That's the only thing I'll say. Make a decision.
Look at your capital costs, right? Look at what you're already spending on certain construction items, things that you have to do already, you already have to put a handle on your door. Can you replace it with a smart door for the same or comparable price, right? And look at the operating costs. I think you can start to see things balance out.
Well, terrific. Thanks for your patience. We went a little bit over. Give our panel a round of applause.